Hello there, duelists, and welcome to another Sir Slob's deck profile. This week I'm branching out a bit and have Witchcrafter both on the playmat and in the virtual world of Duel Links, so we'll see how that goes. Witchcrafter are an archetype out of Infinity Chasers and were notoriously expensive for a fairly average archetype. But with the Megatin reprints, everyone now has a reasonable chance of casting spells to your opponents all out of life points. So let's see what these Masters of Magic are all about. Okay, so we've got 3 Schmietta. Definitely going to butcher some of these names, but oh well. So all the Witchcrafter cards have, or all the smaller Witchcrafter monsters, should I say, let's just clarify, have a quick effect where they can tribute themselves and send a spell card from your hand to your graveyard to special summon a Witchcrafter from your deck. And then they also have an effect when they're in the graveyard to banish themselves to do a thing. So in Schmietta's case, you can banish her to send a Witchcrafter card from your deck to your graveyard. She's obviously really good, so she's really what we want to be hitting as a kind of like our play starter. From there we've got 3 Witchcrafter Genni. So Genni is, I don't know, it's an interesting one. I'm torn with this card, but basically what it can do is it can banish itself with a spell, Witchcrafter spell, and then its effect becomes that effect. So you kind of get like a double search or, you know, a double special summon from a hand. So it's obviously really good, but it does kind of eat up those resources in the graveyard. From there I'm running a couple of one-offs, so I'm running 1 Pittore and 1 Potterie. Pittore, sorry, should I say. So Pittore, you banish Pittore and then you draw a card and send a Witchcrafter card from your deck to from your hand to the graveyard, and if you don't, then you banish your entire hand. So obviously it's a bit of a downside, but most of the time you're going to be activating that, knowing that you're going to get that draw and that cycle. And obviously, well, I'll explain with the spells, but the spells kind of come back, so you've kind of not lost any advantage. Potterie is you banish it from the graveyard, target a Witchcrafter card in your graveyard and add it to your hand, but you can only activate it if you don't have any cards in your hand, so it's a little bit conditional, and I wish that Potterie didn't have that extra stipulation, because otherwise it would be quite a good card. From there on to the bigger Witchcrafter cards, so I'm running 2 Witchcrafter Golem Aruru. So this is when your opponent activates a card or effect, or targets a spellcaster monster for an attack. So if they're targeted for an effect or for an attack, you can special summon this card from your hand, target 1 card your opponent controls or a Witchcrafter spell in your graveyard, and add that card back to your hand, which is obviously super good. And what's weird is that during your opponent's standby phase, this card goes back to your hand, so it's kind of like a recursive disruption. Obviously, once the first time your opponent has had Aruru summon them, they're going to be well aware of what the case is and probably try and work around it. But it's still a fairly solid card, and I think definitely worth the addition. And then finally, a couple of another one-offs is 1 Witchcrafter Verre and 1 Witchcrafter Haine. And these 3 can't kind of tag out, which I think would be really good if they could actually, but maybe a little bit too good. So let's go with Haine first, maybe that's a simpler one. So basically, your opponent cannot target other spellcaster monsters with card effects, which I don't think comes up that often, but it's still not bad. It's like a little protection, I suppose. And then you can discard a spell card to pop a card your opponent controls. And then Verre has got a few effects, so one of which is you can discard a spell card to negate the effects of all of your opponent's monsters, which is, obviously really solid. It also doesn't target that, so stuff like, I don't know, non-targeting dragoons would be, I suppose, a good example and stuff like that. She will be able to negate that dragoons. Obviously, assuming the dragoons doesn't negate back, but whatever, we're going to bypass that. She's also got an effect where if a spellcaster monster is targeted for an attack, you can reveal different spell cards from your hand, and that monster gains 1,000 attack and defense until the end of, I think, the end of the turn? I can't really remember, but it's definitely until the end of the battle phase. And from there we've got some hand trap. So I've got 3 Effect Veiler, which again, I think you could probably put in whatever you wanted to. I felt this was maybe synergistic, considering Effect Veiler is a spellcaster. Okay, and then on to the spells. Well, actually on the trap, which I've included in this. So 3 Witchcrafter Creation. So again, all of the Witchcrafter spells have, if you control a Witchcrafter monster and it's in your graveyard, you can add it back to your hand at the end phase, which is obviously super great. The downside is you can only use one of the effects per turn. So creation is our rota, so you just add a Witchcrafter monster from your deck to your hand, which obviously means that we can get access to, you know, the cards that we need at the optimum times. I find that I rarely add this back from my graveyard to my hand, just because I'm always using, you know, that search effect. From there, we're running 3 Witchcrafter Unveiling, which I think was a more recent one, got released in Ecto, yeah, Eternity Code, is that right? Yeah. So this was to try and counteract your kind of Ash Blossom, you know, kind of, well, weakness, should we say. So Unveiling, you special summon a Witchcrafter monster from your hand, and if you do, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to the activation of spellcaster monster effects for the rest of the turn, which means that no flipping Ash Blossom. So you don't lose 2 cards to the single Ash Blossom. It's also great to, you know, just to get cards out of your hand. You know, some of your bigger monsters could sometimes have bricked before. And I think that in general it's a solid addition. Obviously it's still got that add back. From there we're running 2 Witchcrafter Holiday. So this is kind of our monster reborn. Target a Witchcrafter monster graveyard, special on it. Simple. And then it's got the same end phase effect. And then we're running a bunch of different one-ofs. So I'm running 1 Collaboration, which allows your monster to attack twice and be immune to spell and trap effects during the battle phase. Draping, which will bounce spells equal to the number of Witchcrafter monsters that you control. And then 1 Bystreet and 1 Scroll, which is the continuous one, which can work slightly differently. So if a Witchcrafter monster would discard a card to activate their effect, you can send this from the face up to the graveyard, and it's still got that add back effect. But they've also got an additional effect. So the Bystreet protects each Witchcrafter monster from being destroyed the first time it would be destroyed. And then Scroll is if a Witchcrafter monster destroys a monster by battle, you get to draw a card. So Scroll's probably the worst, I would say, just because it's not that, you know, it's not that useful. From there, we're playing 3 Spell Chronicle, which is a fairly older card, I suppose, and one that doesn't really see any play anywhere. And this is kind of like our additional gimmick, I suppose, of the Witchcrafter thing. So what Spell Chronicle does is you just send your entire hand to the graveyard, which hopefully you've either got your Witchcrafter spells or, you know, nothing, and then you banish 5 spell cards from your deck to the graveyard. I think it's with different names. Oh no, it's not. It's just you can do whatever you want. So you can banish 5 spells, and then it's got some convoluted add back effect and also some burn damage if your opponent destroys it while there's still banished spells. But basically what we're doing is we send our 5 spells to the banished zone, and then we immediately try and recruit them back with our trap card. So the other effects are kind of not that relevant. Basically what we're saying is send 5 spell cards to the banished zone. From there I'm running 3 Pot of Extravagance, and I'm not going to go through the extra deck with this. You do not touch the extra deck, so just run whatever you see fit. Probably 3 of each of the useful nightmares and some other stuff, I would imagine, is probably the way you want to go. But I'm not going to bother showing you an extra deck in this profile. From there I'm running 2 Forbidden Chalice, which I think is just kind of like an effect negator, but also a spell card, so it kind of works hand in hand with some of the other things. 1 Upstart Goblin and 1 Called by the Grave. And then finally we've got our only trap, which I'm running 3 of, which is Witchcrafter Patronus. So you can target one of your banished or in the grave spellcaster monsters, shuffle it back into the deck, and add yourself a Witchcrafter spell, or spell. And then if it's in the graveyard, you can banish it to add Witchcrafter spell cards with different names back to your hand. So you can kind of see the synergy with the Spell Chronicle. You banish 5, and then Witchcrafter Patronus banishes itself to add those 5 back to your hand, and obviously from there you've got a huge advantage, and hopefully you're in a winning position. Okay, so we're here in the virtual world. It's the first time I've kind of done a virtual, you know, kind of voiceover for a deck profile. So the Duel Links variant, as you can see, is a much more trimmed down deck. I mean, again, just by the way of some of the cards not being, you know, in the card pool in the, you know, the Duel Links game. And, you know, the extra deck as with the, the TCG variant is completely irrelevant, so I'm ignoring it. You just, kind of play whatever you can. A couple of rank 4s probably wouldn't go amiss, just to, kind of get rid of, your Raiden and Scimitar, if they're just sitting on board. And as you can see with that, I'm playing a small Light Sworn engine, Raiden and then the Charge of the Light Brigade, to kind of kickstart the deck and get as much stuff in the graveyard as possible. And I think that gives you kind of like extra, starter cards. So I think, between the Pittore, the Scimitar and the Raiden, those are kind of your starting cards. I mean, even Charge of Light Brigade, I suppose, that's goes without saying, I suppose. But yeah, so that gives you, a bigger starting play, I would say. I think the downside to that is that obviously, due to the way that the Duel Links Forbidden list is implemented, or limited list, should I say, is implemented, it means that because we're playing Charge of the Light Brigade, we can only play one Witchcrafter Holiday because they're both at 2. So to compensate for this, I've added an extra Unveiling, which I think isn't really a bad sign. I think one of the best opening hands you can have is an Unveiling, a spell card, Scimitar and Raiden, because then you can normal summon the Raiden, do some milling, summon the Scimitar with the Unveiling, get rid of the Scimitar, do some dumping, and I think by that stage you're off to a really good time. So I think a couple of the other things, I've got two Cyclones, which I think you could probably easily bump this up to 3 if you wanted to kind of, as your back row hate. I think Duel Links, much more than TCG, is much more a back row centric, kind of game. And on top of that, I've got 2 Parallel Twister. So Parallel Twister is something that I don't really see a lot of people playing. I really like it. So you send a spell and trap card to the graveyard to destroy a card on the field, which I think is really, really solid and it's got a huge amount of flexibility. What I would say is that, it's not nearly as potent as Storm, which wipes out, as many spell and trap cards as you kind of sent. But what I would say is that, you send a Witchcrafter card with Parallel Twister and then you get that back in your end phase. You've not really lost that resource. So I suppose the only other slight thing that I'm running, which is different from the kind of standard, TCG archetype or build, is the Masterpiece. So this can add a spell or trap card, and it can be any, as long as you've got a Witchcrafter card. So you can add a Cyclone or a Parallel Twister should the need arise. And then also it's kind of got that banish effect where you banish it and a number of spell cards in order to special summon a Witchcrafter monster with that level, which can be good in a pinch because, obviously if your life points are threatened. So I suppose I'll go over some of the differences, is what I would say. I think that this deck is actually better in Duel Links than it is on the TCG side of it. I think hand traps are a huge pain in the neck, and there's not really any of that going on in Duel Links. And I think that the fact that they've only got 4,000 life points means that the Witchcrafter can very much more easily threaten game, whereas 8,000 life points takes Witchcrafters a lot longer in the TCG. I usually play Power of Dark, which puts is it Umi? No, not Umi. What the hell's the dark variant? Is it Yami? Yeah. The Spellcaster field spell, which only gives you a 200 boost, which isn't really that relevant, but I think it's really good with Parallel Twister because it gives you an immediate thing with that. You could also play it with Spell Specialist because you're running enough spells in order to be able to add, to up your chances of having a spell card in your opening hand. I'm currently doing all right. I think I'm kind of max leveled in the current Kyber Cup, and I'm meandering about at the bottom, at the bottom of the tables in the second half of that. But I think it's genuinely been fairly solid. So yeah, I mean, maybe duel you and Duel Links as well. All right. So in conclusion, what I would say is Witchcrafter have a huge drawback in that the spells can only use one effect, which really reduces the options available. I can kind of understand where they're coming from a design point of view and not making them too busted, because searching with creation and adding it back in the end phase might have been too many pluses. But in order to make a good archetype, I think they've definitely missed the mark here. A single Ash Blossom sometimes is just dual ending, and maybe that's why they're so much better in Duel Links. So in terms of kind of relevance and meta relevance and how well they think they do, it's a 2 from me. I think it's a casual level deck, in my opinion, from top to bottom. I do like the mechanic, you know, the spell interaction with the monster effects. I think that's a really cool kind of resource-based and strategic-based way of playing the game. However, there isn't really a lot to innovate on and to learn once you've got that linear play down, you know, get to Haine, get to Madame Verre, Aruru in hand, you kind of got, you know, your 3 disruptions, you know, there's nothing really else to go on. So it's a 3 for the fun factor. The deck has come way down in price though, which I think is a huge boon, thanks to the Megatins. So sitting at about $115 with my estimates from TCG Player makes this deck a good one for beginners in my opinion. You know, there's not too much going on. I think it's fairly concise in terms of what you need to know, and you know, you don't really need to know about an extra deck or anything like that, which means I think it's a good way of jumping into the game. So, do you prefer TCG Witchcrafter or their Duel Links virtual counterparts? Thanks for watching and subscribe for more videos.